Hey all, we're back here. I just wanted to do a simple video on how to do very basic fire combat in Bataille, which is the game I've been focusing on lately. But I do have some issues with it in terms of the vagueness of the rules, such as firing in this game depends on your formation, like line or column, and the type of unit that it is. Well, there's a ton of units in this game, and by looking at this, I have no idea. I know this is infantry, but I don't know what kind, because you have to look on, move the camera, you have to look on this chart, and I sure as heck cannot tell by looking at these what the heck unit I'm dealing with here. I know that it's part of the French command, and it says on the back, 3rd Guard something something. So I'm not entirely sure how to class this unit. Because if you look here, it doesn't say anything about guards. So I'm not entirely sure. It's infantry, but I'm not sure what, how to classify this. I'll be honest with you. So anyway, I know this is Russian infantry, plain and simple. This is very standard Russian unit right here. I have no idea how to classify this. Musketeers, Grenadier, nope, it's not a Jaeger, it's not Guard, it's not Guard Jaeger, it's not Militia, so I'm just going to say it's Musketeer, Russian Musketeer. That's where it's a little bit vague, but anyway, in this game, firing is really simple. If you do, this is standard fire combat, you just move right next to a unit. If you don't assault, you'll do standard fire combat. So if anyone can identify this unit, other than infantry, is it line, sapper? It's not a sapper. I think it's just a line unit. That's just my guess. But it is part of the French command, so. Basically in this game there are several types of formations you can be in. Some are voluntary. And you want to be in line formation when you fire. And the way a unit is positioned determines the formation it's in. So when it moves, this would be column, for example. And you would move hex and face a hex side. If you're in line, you would face the vertices like this of the hex. Like so. Line formation isn't really the best for moving because you pay +1 movement point for each hex you go into. So instead of 1, this would be 2. Because you're spread out in a line, you're trying to stay in formation. Column is your main movement. But getting stuck in column and having to shoot is not the best thing. So here we have 2 units that have moved right next to each other without assaulting or anything like that. We're just going to pretend here. French here, Russian here. Only 4 increments can fire out of a hex when you do standard fire combat. Increments is the first number, 10, 7 is the movement. So there's 12 increments here and 10 here. Regardless, only 4 increments can fire out of each hex. So it would be a 4 and a 4 shooting each other. Now what gives you your modifiers are the type of national unit and the formation it's in. So assuming this is a French line unit, he'll take the number of increments firing and multiply it by this multiplier. If it were a column, he would use his printed fire value. Now, you're probably asking where that is. Well, units have some hidden values on the other side. So if he was in column, you would see that he would only get a fire strength of 8. When you're in line, you do your increments times 3. So it's 4 increments firing out of the hex times 3 for a total attack power of 12 for the French. Now, the increments are also like the hit points of a unit, and we'll see how that works here in a minute. the Russian is the defender. The fire defense chart is done by the type of unit, infantry, and what formation it's in. Line. He's in clear terrain, so he has a defensive 9. You divide 12 by 9 and you'll get a ratio that you will then round down. And that's really about all you need to do for fire combat. So that's basically 1-to-1 odds. You then find your table, your fire combat table, which is pretty small in this game. So you take your fire chart here, and we're at 1-to-1 now. About the dice in this game. Obviously we'll be looking here at 1-to-1. And you may think, what the heck, 51 to 66? That's weird. In this game, the dice are rolled and you will designate a colored die as the first number, and then this would be your second number. So for example, green is the first number. This would be a roll of 54. Now, if you look on the 1-to-1 table, a 54 would have actually caused a 1 increment damage hit. And that's really all there is for the most basic type of fire combat in this game. So if we go back to our example here, let me see if I can work this so I get both into the camera. We'll just put these out in the clear, make sure they're in line formation so we can see this. It's going to be hard to get this all on the camera, I'm afraid, but we can always try it out. Let's see if we can get this down here. It's going to be, let's see if I can zoom out for us. There we go. Move these up here. Alright, so it's a 1-to-1 shot. And the fire combat is simultaneous in this game. So you won't apply, the defender will not fire back at a reduced rate. So a 33 for the French would be a miss because you need 51 through 66. So that would be a miss. And the Russians would fire back. So when the Russian, so fire combat is simultaneous. There's a segment called the fire combat segment, and that's all units that can conduct a fire attack now fire. So the French and the Russians would fire back 4 increments. It is a musketeer Russian unit, so it's ×3, so it's 12 again. Again, the French is infantry in line and clear, so that's 9. It's the same exact odds. So there's a 53. Now, a 53 is a hit on our table. So the Russians actually shot and fired back and hit. See, 51 to 66 is a 1 increment hit. So you would simply, at that point, take a 1 increment damage marker and place it on top of the French unit, like so. Now the French unit took a casualty. Whenever any unit takes a casualty through fire, except offensive, defensive fire in the assault part, it must take a morale check. Now, when the French unit gets down to its last increment, or might take a certain amount of losses, its fire ability will get halved and things like that. But so the French unit did take a shot. Now, normally you would have to roll the dice and add any modifiers and beat the morale value, which on this Russian unit is 22, the bottom left. So you would have to roll higher than that. Now, the cool thing about this French unit is it's so awesome that it literally does not suffer morale. There's a dash right there. So if you go to the rule book, you can see that units with a morale rating of dash always pass any checks against their morale. Units stacked with a leader with an A morale rating always pass any checks against their morale. So you can stack your units with an A leader for his morale, and they would never break. So that French unit is not going to break. So even though he took some damage, he's not going anywhere. He is firmly entrenched. Now, if this had been the case here, the Russians do have a chance to break if they had taken 1 damage. So if this had been the other way around, we would simply roll the dice and try to get higher than 22. And there's a 62, so that Russian unit would pass. Now, there are some things that will modify that roll later on, and even if you fail, you're just put into disorder. And disorder doesn't really do anything bad until you get the next level of disorder, which is plus grand disorder, which is where you might rout and take off. There are some morale modifiers when you roll the dice. Certain things can happen. You can take, for example, I forgot what they called it. For example, you can take grievous losses, and that's when a battalion or regiment unit suffers from a single event 50% of its current strength a loss. These are regiments, 3 dots right here tell you that. The die roll for the morale check is modified by -6 for the worse. So there are a few things. If the top unit in a stack is eliminated by fire combat, the remaining units in the stack still take a morale check. In this game, everything that happens to a stack hits the top unit first. It's also like a fog of war type of thing. And that is basically fire combat. Now there is a rule, a target density rule, which is one thing we did not put in. There's a target density rule where if there's more than, I believe it's 9. Yeah, it's 9. And it's modified +1 for every increment greater than 9. So 10, 11, 12, this would have been a +3. And here it would have been a +1. So there's so many French here that the Russian actually has a better chance of doing, gets +3 on the die roll. Now, there's another thing in this game that's a little bit weird that I should explain to people, and that's the way die modifiers work. So, you'll remember I said that it's +1 for every increment past 9. So the Russian player would have gotten a +3 of the die roll. So, let's say he rolled a 62, and that was a hit. Now, here is a chart that I printed out online that really helps. The die rolls in this game are modified by base 10 as opposed to base 6. So if I had rolled a 62, you would actually go and count 9, or I'm sorry, 3 up. So it would have been 1, so it would have been 1, 2, 3. Now say you had a 9 modifier and rolled a 41. It would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you can see that the 41, you just don't tack 9 on and it becomes 50. It actually goes to 54. And then you would cross-reference it. So a modifier of 3 to a 62 keeps you in the same area in the 1-to-1 chart. It's still going to be a 1 increment hit, but that's something to remember. It doesn't, you're not going to see a big, you add things up quite differently when it comes down to how die roll modifiers are done. So for example, a die roll of 35 is modified by 9. You start with 35 and you count up 9 for the modifier result. Counting up, you start with 36, so it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It becomes a 52. So you can see where it's a little bit weird because you would think, well, 35 plus 9 is 44, but that's not the case. So you have to kind of, this chart that I printed out online from Board Game Geek helps a lot and keeps things in perspective. So, and that's really all there is to fire combat. So you had the French player take an increment of damage, and they aren't going to go anywhere because they're an elite unit, a guard unit. And the French player, when they shot, missed. And there's other factors too, like if you're in the woods, you know, their defense would be different and things like that. So you can see here, for example, forest, you can't even go into a forest. You're forced to go into a general order mode, which is what that's called. Their defense would have been 10 if the Russians were in the woods or something like that. And then there's all these different terrain types. So that is just basic fire combat. And what it breaks down to is just find the number of, if you're in line, you're going to get 4 increments out of the hex, and you just multiply it by the type of French unit it is, and you'll usually end up with 12 until the battle gets later on and you take a lot of injuries. And you have that target density thing too, which I actually forgot about. So if there's more than 9 increments in a hex, that is a big unit, and bodies are going to start falling. And that's really about it for standard fire combat. And again, this is if the 2 units had just moved right up next to each other. Most of the time you may not see that happen. Someone may call an assault and move in, and then you got to do a whole different assault thing. That's about it for that. And then we'll discuss more of the rules a little bit later on, such as movement and things like that. Alright, thanks again. And if there's any errors, just let me know in the comments below. Like, for example, what is this categorized as for the French? It's part of the French command. It's an elite unit. I'm assuming it's a guard unit, but when I look here, where does that go? Because I think that légère means light in French, but don't quote me on that. So I don't know where they would go into, because they're not a French ally. So they don't go down here. The Russians are a little bit easier. You're basically just a musketeer, grenadier, Jaeger, guard, Jaeger, militia. So that's one of the confusing things about the game. A more concise listing of what the units were would help. And that's why a lot of people tend to shy away from these titles. Alright, so that's it. Let me know in the comments if you can figure out what that is. Thanks.